Hey, Go Church, it's good to see you. Hope that you're doing well. Super excited to jump into a new series with you for this month. I hope that you know that God has big plans for you. I say that all the time, specifically maybe through the art of being unordinary. Believe it or not, you are uniquely made. God didn't make another one of you, and you are designed with a specific purpose, and no one else can do what you can do. And there's some amazing things about you, and I want to consider what it means to break the mold in our personal lives and for the church as well. I know I'm uniquely made. My goodness, I don't know what I'm doing with my hair, and I'm probably the only guy that's good at math and art. And there's just some things that I know make me stand out. And I'm learning how to embrace that and kind of figure out that God has big plans for those things. And I believe He has that for you. I want to talk this month about your leadership, about what God could have you do in this time. Also about Go Church as a church and what that leadership looks like and what we're going to do moving forward. I'll tell you some unique things about our church and about me is that I might be the only person that in a way is not looking forward to getting back together as a church. And let me explain a little bit more why. Don't get me wrong, I can't wait to see you and be with you, but I don't want to make the mistake of going back to the way things were. I'm convinced God is trying to teach us a lesson during this time. I think there's a lot of things that we could do to be extraordinary, and we might have to consider some unordinary ways to get there. I'm convinced we're not going to go back to normal. There's going to be a new normal moving forward. And I get the impression the church is right in the middle of that, and there is some things that we can do to be the extraordinary people God called us to be and to be the extraordinary church God made us to be. And so I want to learn the lessons we can during this time. And I want you to know that you should be praying for Go Church as we are honestly actively praying for what's the next location for us. Where are we going to kind of call home after all this is said and done? Because I'm not sure, but I get the impression the school is going to be a while before we can meet there again. And so we really don't know where we're going to be at just yet. But to me, again, that's exciting, and I think that gives us opportunities. And so be praying for what our new home might look like, because I, for one, can't wait for what that's going to be. But I want to talk to you about the people that fill that spot up, because here's what I know about you. I know that if this Sunday we were all together again in Deltona Elementary School, do you think when you walked in the doors you would care about the paint on the walls and the smell of the floor and the school? Do you think you would miss being in that building? Maybe a little bit for some of us, but I know that when I were to walk into that room, I would be looking for your faces and to see you, and I'd want to hug every single one of you, and I just miss my people. I miss being with you, and I think you're like me as well. Because the church isn't the four walls, it's the people that make up the church. And you guys are so incredibly important. I think there is a new time for us as a church moving forward. There's a couple lessons I think I have learned, and I want to share with you this idea. Our name gives me so much insight and power that we're called Go Church, and I want you to think about what does it mean for you to go. In an interesting, kind of ironic twist almost, a lot of us are stuck at home, right? We're kind of doing what we can do to protect other people and ourselves. And so that's an interesting time. And there's some things that are good about that. For some of us, there's some things that aren't so good about that. But we cannot wait to go out and to go back to the new normal and see people and the routines that we love, because we knew what it was like before. And this like phase that we're in of being home, this is not our favorite, and we're ready to go, and in more ways than one, and we can't wait to do that. So that's a pretty cool way of looking at life, that we should be people that want to go and go out and do a lot of things. And yet some of us, if we're not careful, there's parts of us when we think about church, it would almost be like we got this order to stay home, and we just kind of never left. Why does it feel like sometimes at churches that we just kind of want to be home, that we can't wait to get into the building and sit in our seat and just kind of be home when God called us to go? Like we're supposed to be out. In fact, we know how beautiful it is doing God's work. And some of us, we've experienced ministry in some really powerful ways out and about in our community. And yet there's that part of us that just kind of wants to sink back in and go home. But that's not who we are. That's not who you are. I believe God called you out to do some amazing things. One of the things I kind of saw that's really interesting about this time is there's a professor that had a psychological study about the human mind during crisis. And we do this thing where in the middle of difficult seasons, our mind kind of goes into this kind of defensive mode, this kind of passive, okay, just kind of hold out and get shelter. And just kind of, we turn a lot of stuff off and just kind of process at a really minimal level, kind of survival level, and don't worry about everything else. Let's just make sure I have my people and I have my stuff and I'm going to be okay. And we just kind of passively survive, waiting for the lights to come back on, waiting for normal to come back, and then we can kind of, oh, that's right, and come back to the person that we were. And so we kind of just live passively. And that to me is really dangerous. What I don't want you or I to do is kind of during this time kind of live passively, quietly, kind of waiting for things to get back to normal and then run right back to a building and do things the way we did before. Because I'm convinced this is an opportunity in disguise for us to discover again in more and beautiful ways how we can go, how we can be the church that God called us to be. Because I believe God has big things planned for you. And I think one of the ways that you and one of the ways the church is going to break the mold is to do things maybe that might be a little bit unordinary. In fact, you're already experiencing some of that. We've kind of learned how to be a digital church. And this is not necessarily what anybody expected was going to be the way 2020 was going to go. But yet we took an opportunity and kind of ran with it. Now we're doing pretty well as a digital church. I love that you guys are watching this, hopefully with your friends and family, and doing a watch party. And it's a pretty neat opportunity. And so I'm grateful that we took that opportunity and we pivoted to do something. And now there's more for us to do next. I want to appeal to your leadership. I want to appeal to your heart to be something more than you are right now. That maybe if you've turned off some of your creativity and some of your ability because you're just kind of surviving, I want to challenge you to turn yourself back on, to thrive in the middle of this chaos. Because I'm looking for ways to do it. I really do believe that I am, and I want you to join me in that. I want you to think about the possibilities God has for you in the month of May, in the month of June, for the life of the church, because I believe He has big things planned for us, and I don't want to cower away. I want to pursue that. I want to look into that. I want to find what that looks like. And I believe He's not worried about the walls. He's worried about the people. And so how can we grow as a church this month? And what can we do together to be the best versions of ourselves, to be extraordinary and find it maybe through the unordinary, the things that are not as normal and not as common, because I believe He made you with a special purpose and He has big plans for you. And so what I want to do is to kind of help you to see what type of leadership I have in mind for you, what type of future I have in store, and what I think we can do together. I want to read some scripture and glean some insight from the way Jesus led and the way God shows us that we ought to lead, and that from that will give you some direction on what you can do, what that looks like, and some steps I think we can take moving forward. And so the text for this morning is a pretty famous text. You might have heard this before. This is the Psalm of David, Psalms 23. And I just want you to hear this. I'm going to read it through first, and we're going to kind of walk through some of this stuff together. Psalms 23 starts off, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in paths of righteousness. For His name's sake, even though I walk through the valley of death, the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For You are with me, Your rod and Your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." I love this. It's a powerful psalm, and there's a lot we can learn from it. Of course, I will give you a couple things to learn, but there is more to learn from this text. In fact, I want to encourage you right now today, if you know a lot about this text, maybe the people sitting next to you need to hear some of the insight you have about it. So maybe after the sermon's over, talk about what this passage means to you. Because there's a lot of insight that a lot of you have, and I don't want that to stay in your mind and behind your lips. Let the truth that God has given you come out and find ways to do it. But I just want to share a couple things I've learned from this text. That the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want, and He makes me lie down in green pastures. This idea of shepherd, we see this in Scripture. This is a powerful truth kind of made famous by this passage, and there's a couple others. And so God uses this visual of a shepherd for a couple key reasons. That is one of the best biblical descriptions of leadership. is a shepherd. We see this with the overseer, with the role of an elder of a church would be like a shepherd that takes care of the flock. And so there's a lot of reasons behind that, and I see that being so important for times such as this. And in really incredible ways, I see the world in some ways, coming back to church, looking for the Good Shepherd. And I think that's because there's a lot of false prophets and a lot of false shepherds out there, kind of the hired hands, and all the things that people find their strength in are just not there anymore. But you and I both know the church didn't go away. It might have changed a little bit, but it hasn't gone. And so people are seeing that, oh, that's right, there was strength there that I think I need right now. People are remembering the leadership and the consistency and the solid rock that Jesus is. The good shepherd can be in their life. And so I see a lot of seeking people looking for hope and looking for strength. And so this illustration, this picture of a shepherd is such an important role in the world. And so if you dismiss this sermon already thinking, well, I'm not a leader, I don't know if this content's going to apply to me, well, what about a shepherd? Are there people in your care that you are responsible to look over? If there are anybody that fits that description, I think there's something you can learn from the leadership Jesus has and the way he shows us what a good shepherd does. And so I'm going to keep going. That he makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. And I'm just going to kind of stop right there. There is so much protection in the Good Shepherd. There's a lot of things that a shepherd does. Specifically, the illustration with a shepherd and his sheep, you kind of see that a shepherd would lay down at the gate of a sheep pen to kind of protect his sheep from any threats that might come. There's great protection in that. One of the things I learned about shepherds, especially the Old Testament, is that they would, and actually this fits into, I'm sorry, I'm kind of jumping around with the text. This fits into verse 5, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil and my cup overflows. There's this protection from shepherds where shepherds would take oil and they would cover the head of a sheep for a couple of different reasons. For flies and insects and different kind of pests. If they had oil, that would kind of keep them from honestly like laying eggs and kind of biting at the sheep, especially on their face or their eyes and the sensitive parts. And so that was kind of a strategy the shepherds had to do that. But it was for another reason, and this one kind of blew me away. Shepherds would put oil on the head of a sheep because one of the biggest threats to sheep wasn't the wolf or maybe the animal you might think of. It was oftentimes a snake. A snake could kind of creep in, and so as the sheep were grazing and going about their business, not paying attention, the snake would be right at its face and jump up and bite it. And so that was a big threat for shepherds. And so when they had that oil, it kind of had a barrier almost. And so if there was venom attached to a bite or even a bite in general, that oil was almost an extra layer of protection. That's kind of a cool thing about this anointing their heads with oil. That, by the way, in some powerful ways the Lord does for you as well. There's a level of protection this good shepherd is prepared to have for you. He will fight away the wolves. Even as the enemies might come, he will protect his sheep because they're his and they're important to him. And he loves you in that kind of crazy way. We've talked about this before. I hope you know how protected you are by the Lord. I hope you know how much he's willing to do for you to keep you safe. He loves you and does some amazing things to keep it that way. And I just hope you know that his love for you isn't going to go anywhere and that you would trust in his voice during this time, because I think that's incredibly important for you to remember. But he doesn't just protect us from the external harms. He protects us from the internal ones as well. These words, again, are so powerful that he leads me beside quiet waters, that we would lay down in these green pastures. And again, for sheep, as I learned a little bit more about them too, if there was a fast river, that was very dangerous for sheep. And you might not know this, or you might already, but sheep are not known to be the most intelligent animals in the world. And so they would just kind of walk into open water. And if it was a fast-moving river, that could be life-threatening because their wool would almost be like a sponge and would kind of cause them to sink. And that didn't really go well for the sheep. And so the idea of quiet waters has a whole different connotation to it. A place to give some nourishment through the water that they could drink and not be a threat to them. My goodness, man, there's so much that the sheep get through the shepherd, and there's so much that you get through him. But I just want you to think about the restoring of your soul, the healing of the shepherd, the ways that he can comfort your innermost being. There's an illustration I heard about a cardiologist, and he had hired someone to come redesign his lobby. And this man came to redesign this cardiologist's lobby and was looking at different ways to paint and redoing the chairs, and then kind of realized, hey, we don't really need to do your chairs because normally when I come to doctor's offices, you can kind of see rips in the cushion, especially by the front of it. But it doesn't seem like any of your cushions have really been damaged the way that you might think they are. Because anytime people would come to sit in his office, at the cardiologist's office, they were sitting right at the very front and not really sitting into the couch or the cushions on the back. And so there really wasn't a lot of damage because people were kind of sitting really tense and just sitting, more on their knees than the chair and kind of trembling and waiting for what they were going to find out from a cardiologist. And so, my goodness, doesn't that show a little bit about what life can be like for us, is that these chairs didn't have to be fixed because people would never sit back into them and trust what was going to happen. Maybe some of the chairs in your life don't have a lot of wear to them because you haven't learned how to just sit back. Lean into the chair of your life and let God comfort you. Maybe that's one of the things you need to do today. Maybe literally where you're sitting, just to sit back, take a deep breath and remember who's going to take care of you, who restores your soul. In all the ways that you need it, who comforts you, who guides you, who gives you direction and purpose and heals your heart. One of my other favorite things about a shepherd, especially in this context, is sheep, when they're grazing, if they're kind of put in the same spot, they'll literally just eat the grass down to the root and then even the root, and they'll just start eating the dirt that's in front of them. They literally won't figure out kind of how to move to another spot of nourishment. They'll just keep eating and eating and eating until they're eventually eating dirt and getting sick. And so a shepherd, one of his primary jobs actually is to move them to a place where they can graze. So these green pastures are incredibly important. I'm curious what you've been filling your soul with. Is there some things God might be moving you into? Some new things that he's challenged you to think through? I believe there is. I believe right on the other side of this pandemic, there is a green pasture in store for us. And I can't wait to see what it looks like. And so I want to be willing to move in whatever ways the Lord puts on our heart to do that. But here's what I want you to think about. That's just a couple things about this passage that I see that the shepherd does for you. And I know, man, if I was talking to Maureen Farquhar and she would talk to me how important it is to be still. If I was talking to Sharon Gagnon or Rick D'Angelo, there's a couple things I've heard from them about this passage. And my goodness, you have a lot to learn from one another. And so teach each other and study these words. But just kind of know my heart on this. And really, at the end of the day, what I want you to think about is if the Good Shepherd, if the Lord is willing to do all these things for you, all the things that I talked about and all the things that I didn't. And there's a lot to this passage in the whole book about God's love for you and his willingness to pour his life into people, into sheep. I want you to think about what does that look like for you? Because it is pretty cool that strategically Jesus made his whole ministry not about a building, not about what people would do when they gather in a building, but about their heart and about protecting them and about healing their soul and leading them in the right direction and giving them a home and giving them a life. And so Jesus' whole ministry was about people. He was a good shepherd that takes care of us better than any other shepherd ever could. Again, you have people in your care that you were responsible to take care of. We've talked about this before, but Go Church kind of made a list of our members and people we're attached to and kind of divvied that up and kind of reached out to some people. A couple of you have brought this up, and this is good for every one of you to think about. Who would be on your list? Is there a list of people in your life that you could care for a little bit more? Because if God was willing to do what he's done for you, what can you do for other people? And so maybe one of the things I want to challenge you with today is to make a list of people that you can reach out to. Because I think they need you. I think your hope is going to change their life. I believe that God has big plans for you, and it might not be what you expect it to be. But I believe they're asking for hope. They're asking for the life that you find through the Lord. And so this list of people could be people that are far from God. This list of people might be people that need your protection all the time. But you should take a moment and make a list, because I want to challenge you with your leadership, with your discipleship, with your shepherding. I want you to think about who can you pour your time into. uh, through a discipling relationship, through investing in people, because God wants us to care for people. That was his strategy. And regardless of social distancing and when things open and when things don't, you can still invest in people. And I want you to really consider that this month. I want you to consider who you are investing in. Also, who's investing in you, who's growing you and challenging you and growing you closer to the Lord. One of the things I really want to get a little more focused on for this month, and you're going to hear more about this, is what does your small group look like? Some of you are still meeting as if nothing's changed, and I'm so grateful to hear that. Some of you haven't met since before this happened or even earlier this year, and so I want to challenge you to revisit, what does a small group look like for you? Maybe there's some people that you could do a Zoom meeting with and have a small group and start a new one. In fact, if you're interested in starting a small group, I want to know about it. You can leave a comment below. You can message me, email me, let me know. In fact, this month I'm going to provide some content about what it means to be a small group leader. There is so much content out there. We've produced a lot through Go Church. RightNowMedia.com is a phenomenal resource. We can get you a login for that. And first and foremost, the Word of God, if you would consider having a Bible study, read a book of the Bible with your small group. That might be one of the best things you can do to be the church that God called us to be the shepherd God has called you to be. Because if he was willing to protect and to lead and to heal, couldn't you do that with these words as well? Are there people in your life that you need to bring healing into them? Bring some protection and lead them in the way that God has called us all to go. Because we follow Jesus and they're going to follow you. So who can you lead? Who can you protect? Who can you heal during this time? Because I don't want to stay home. I don't want to just get back to being in a building and then just kind of, we'll see, maybe who shows up, but who right now needs your leadership. I believe he called you to big things, and I don't want you to hold back just because you don't know what tomorrow looks like. Because here's what I understand about our mission. The mission doesn't change, but the method will. We are in the middle of that right now. Jesus said to us, go make disciples of all nations. Baptize them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Teach them to obey everything I've commanded of you. And surely I will be with you always to the very end of the age. I heard a story that Tabitha is pursuing an opportunity to do a Bible study with her family, and I could not be more proud of her willingness to serve. I pray that a lot of you would consider what it looks like for you this month to step out into the unordinary and be the person maybe God has been calling you to be the whole time. Because believe it or not, this disturbance, this pandemic is more than just kind of an episode. If you're looking at this moment as a time that just kind of, it's an interruption and I'm waiting for it to be over so I can go back to normal, there is not going to be the old normal. There will be a new normal. In fact, I'm not even sure what normal is if you're at my house anytime. There's opportunities for you moving forward. There's things that you can do that you maybe haven't been doing yet. Maybe the grass you've been eating, he said, it's time for you to move into something else. You have been called to go make disciples. The mission is not going to change, but the method is. And we're in a moment in history. We have a great opportunity to learn how to pivot best, to do that mission as best as we can. We didn't let not meeting in a building stop us. In fact, as you're watching through a screen, the church is still going to find a way to be the church. I believe one of the next big pivots and movements we can make is, regardless of when Go Church meets together in a home, which we're going to and I cannot wait for, I don't want to get there until I know that you've heard God tell you there's things for you to do that I want you to go. I don't just want you to stay, because I don't want to be a stay church. At the end of the day, I want to measure how many people we send to go than how many people we get to gather in a room to stay. Because I think that's what Jesus called us to do. And you've been called into that mission. And so consider what God is challenging you with. And so again, I'll just kind of go back over and we're going to spend the month talking about this. I want you to think about people. Jesus' strategy was people. All the ways Jesus went as far as going was movement towards people. So who are the people that you need to move towards? What's the list that you need to make of people that are in your life? I would start with people that are far from God. Who can you reach out through a text message or a Facebook video or through a Zoom meeting, and who can you connect with? Because they might just be in a place, and I think a lot of them are, they're just waiting to be asked. They want to know where your hope comes from, and they want to know where the Good Shepherd really is going to lead them as well. And so there are some people that you can reach out and ask. And maybe you can challenge them to do a Bible study with you. and go through a book of the Bible. We can talk more about this, and we're going to. I want you to consider what that looks like, because there's people that need you, and they need the Jesus that's inside of you. And maybe one of the ways, and again, I want you to really think this through, is through starting a small group. We have a couple of them, but we can have a lot more. Most of you that are watching this video are capable of leading a small group. Having people literally in your home, in a parking lot, in a Zoom meeting. You have tons of options, and we want to help you be successful. But you were called to go make disciples. You weren't called to stay home. You weren't called to just kind of sit and watch and see what's going to happen, but I want you to act. I want you to thrive in this. I'm in the same boat. I'm choosing to do the same thing, and I think we're going to be better for it. There is going to be no mistakes if you choose to learn from all the opportunities he puts in front of you. Don't be led by fear, but remember the protection of the shepherd. Don't be overwhelmed by what people might say or what's going to happen, because Jesus said he'll be with you always to the very end of the age. Take a moment today. Take a moment and pray and ask God, show me what unordinary you want in me. Show me what extraordinary you have in mind. I want to be the person you've called me to be. I challenge you to lead. Lead like a good shepherd. Make a list. Reach out to those people. Start a small group. Let us know how we can help you. I believe God has big plans for us this month, and I don't want to miss it. Shame on us if we go back to normal and don't learn the lesson he's teaching us in this moment. I know he's got big plans, and I want to be led by the voice that matters. Let the Good Shepherd speak hope into your life, and we'll be better for it. I love you guys. I hope this is helpful. Hope you have a great week, and we'll catch up here soon. God bless you guys, and peace out.